I grew up in a big family of 15. Today, I'm going to share a bunch of frugal tips and tricks that I learned just from growing up in a large family. A few months ago, I shared a similar video where I was sharing tips and tricks from my mom for feeding your family on a budget. Today's video is going to be very similar, but instead of specifically talking about frugal tips for grocery shopping and meal planning and stuff like that, we're going to be talking a little more broadly about just more frugal tips and ideas that hopefully will be helpful to you. I apologize for my voice. I'm losing my voice for like the second time this winter, but I had this time to record, so we are just going to go with it, and I'll speak up as loudly as I can. So I made this list just as things came to my mind, so it's not in any particular order or anything, but we are just going to jump right in. So first off is the idea of reusing things. This might sound basic, but there were a lot of things that my mom would reuse growing up that maybe some people don't, like washing Ziploc bags and reusing them again. She would also do a lot of homemade bread, so when we did buy bread from the store, we would save those bread bags, and then we could use them for our homemade bread. If my dad's undershirts or my brother's undershirts got kind of worn out, she would use those for rags instead of just tossing them out. Paper towels and napkins are not essential. They are convenient to have, but not essential. So if you are on a tight budget, you can make do with your rags. Grab those old undershirts, like I said, or you can pick up some cloth napkins from a thrift store or another resale shop and use those instead, so you're not always buying napkins. Now, I usually do buy napkins, but I don't buy paper towels all that often. We can make do without them, and it's just one less thing to buy. Butter wrappers work great if you don't have cooking spray on hand. My mom used to save the butter wrappers, especially when the butter was already room temperature or slightly melty. When you unwrap it, you end up with still, a little butter left on the wrapper. She would just stick those like in a little baggie in the fridge, and then when we needed to grease a pan, we would grab those out. It's easy to grease the pan, and that way she didn't have to buy cooking spray. Line drying your clothes is a great way to save on electricity. Now, I don't do this myself. Pablo's mentioned before that he could set up a clothesline for me, and it just sounds like a lot of extra work to me. But my mom did this for a while. For quite a while when I was little. Back in Ohio, I remember we had a clothesline, and then some for a while here in Texas as well. She would do a clothesline, and you would just, take all the clothes out, hang them up, and let them quickly dry out in the sun. And that saves you the electricity from using the dryer. Instead of going out for ice cream with the whole family, go and grab a big container of ice cream instead. Sometimes my parents would want to treat us to ice cream after an activity or something, so they would just run by Walmart, grab a big tub of ice cream, take it home, and we would have our ice cream there. And that was much cheaper than going out someplace and getting individual cones for everybody. And it was just as yummy. One-on-one time with your kids does not need to be expensive. And this is very important, especially if you have 13 kids. If you want to spend time individually with them, you can't be taking them each out for some expensive meal or activity or whatever. As an example, my dad got into the habit of taking one child at a time over to our church. He still is the assistant pastor at our church, and there's a kitchen there in the gym area, and he would take a kid there, take breakfast ingredients and make them a nice breakfast and just have one-on-one time. Didn't cost a thing except for, the cost of those groceries, and it was still super special. Learn to fix stuff yourself. Now, my dad is awesome at this. He's definitely good at trying like everything. So, I can really hardly remember times where we had repairmen come to our house because my dad just would figure out how to do stuff. It does take longer. Like if you've never done something before, it's absolutely going to take longer if you've never done it, and you have to be watching YouTube and, figuring things out. So you are trading the time, like you're saving money, but it's taking extra time. But if you don't have the money, learning to do it yourself is kind of a necessity sometimes, and you will be grateful for the skills that you learn as you figure things out. My parents always drove used cars. They never had a car payment, and that saved them so much. And I have to say, if it is possible that you can own your car and not pay car payments. I know that used cars are more expensive nowadays. Even just buying a kind of old car will cost you a lot. But if you can find an old junker that still drives and you don't have to have a car payment, you can pay it off, that will put you in so much of a better financial situation for if times are tight. Because when times are really tight, when your finances are really tight, You do not want to have to worry about not making that car payment. And I know that was very good for my parents during some times where finances were extremely tight for them, but they owned our cars. And yes, we were taking the cars to the shop, somewhat regularly, trying to keep them running. But I know that it served them very well not having a car payment or car payments every month. Keep the AC a few degrees higher in the summer, a few degrees lower in the winter. Even if it's just a few degrees, it is going to save you money. When we first moved to Texas, my parents bought all of us kids a little small personal fan, and we would use those at night, and they don't take much electricity. And then my parents would really keep our AC quite high. It was at least at 80. One summer I remember it was at 85. I mean, still cooler than it was outside, but it was pretty warm. But it saved them money at a time when they didn't have that much. You don't have to have meat with every single meal. My mom would do meals like mac and cheese, beans and rice. I'm trying to even remember, lentils, different things like that don't have meat and they're still filling. If you have to have meat with a meal, think of it more as a condiment or like a casserole where you're mixing in 2 cups of shredded chicken instead of a meal where you have to have one big entree of meat. Some good homemade bread makes any meal a little more satisfying and exciting. Sometimes we'd be having just a really simple meal, a soup or beans and rice or something like that us kids weren't necessarily super excited about. But if my mom made a homemade bread or a muffin or something like that, that always made us happy. I mean, there's nothing better than homemade bread. And so we would feel like we were eating like kings when she served something like that. And carbs are good for kids. Kids need carbs, and it's a great way to fill up. I'm not saying you should only eat carbs, definitely not. But when the budget's really low, making a good, like a whole wheat bread or something is a good way to help make sure all the kids get filled up. Shop at thrift stores and consignment stores when you can. We loved going to the thrift store. Every so often we would make a trip. There were like 2 or 3 different thrift stores a little ways from us that were all pretty close in proximity to each other. So we would go and find a lot of great stuff when we needed new clothes. It was usually the first place that we looked. Expensive vacations are not a requirement. When I was little, our vacation was going to visit my grandparents every summer. And so we were staying with family. We weren't having to pay for a hotel. We had a blast. I never felt like I was missing out on anything by not going to Florida and the beach or Disney World or whatever. I always had a blast. We had time with family, time away from home, and it was less expensive for my parents than a typical vacation would probably be. More recently, when my parents have traveled, they're part of a program. I think it's called Candle in the Window, I'm pretty sure. And it's like this hospitality network. So when they're home, like people can contact them who are in this network and stay at their house, and then they'll stay at other people's houses. It's kind of different. I know it wouldn't be for everyone. I don't know if it would be for me because it's kind of intimidating to me. But my parents have met so many interesting people, and I have really enjoyed meeting people and saving money all at once. Appreciate hand-me-downs. I don't know how many of you guys like hand-me-downs, but I love them. I love them for my kids. Growing up, I loved them when other people gave them to us. It was just always quite exciting. So don't be ashamed of using and appreciating hand-me-downs, and make sure to pass your own hand-me-downs to other people if they want them. Learn how to cut hair at home. Now, I'm saying this, but I really do not like cutting hair myself. I feel intimidated by it. I've never been very good at it, but thankfully for our family, Pablo decided to take that on. We have 4 boys, and we realized it's getting kind of pricey taking 4 boys out on a regular basis to get their hair cut. So Pablo decided to learn. He just watched some YouTube videos. He's practiced on the boys, and honestly, their haircuts are usually a lot better than what we would get at Great Clips anyways. So I love that he's doing that. We still take Sophie to get a haircut because she only gets it cut like once a year. So she's the privileged one. But the boys all get great haircuts from Pablo, and it saves us a lot of money. My dad did this growing up. He cut all of our hair. I mean, imagine if all 13 of us were going out to get our hair cut, at the salon. Like, that would have added up so much. But Dad cut our hair. He did a really great job. So that was a fantastic way for my parents to save money. Don't go shopping just for fun. I know it's fun to just go walk around the mall, or just, you're at Walmart for groceries and then you're like, oh, let me just go peruse these aisles and just see if there's anything that catches my attention. If you're on a tight budget, that's not a good idea. Like, don't go unless you need something. And if you need something, just go and get what is on your list. Don't buy drinks when you eat out. This is one thing that my family never did because drinks are marked up, right? And so you are going to be paying a lot more. It's going to add a lot to your bill, especially, of course, if you're paying for, you know, a family of 15. Nowadays, I do usually get a drink when I eat out, and because that's what Pablo does. When we first got married, like I would order, if we were going out like for fast food, I would order from the dollar menu and I would not get a drink because that was the way to do it cheap. And then Pablo would get a drink and would get something else not on the dollar menu. And I would feel a little resentful of that until I realized he's not telling me I have to do this. I'm just doing this. I can get a drink too. So we will factor that drink into how much we're planning to spend. But in times when we really are trying to spend less, the drink is the first thing that we will drop because yeah, they are marked up. You can get takeout and then go get a pack of drinks and you're going to be spending a lot less than you would just on the overpriced drink at the restaurant. Eat at home as much as possible. I mentioned this in my other video, but my family hardly ever ate out, which is understandable when you have 15 in your family. But even if you don't, even if it's just you, eating out is always going to cost you more. I talked about that in a recent video, which I will link for you guys, but we compared the price of eating out with the cost per serving of eating at home. I mean, and there's no comparison. It's so much cheaper to eat at home. And speaking of eating at home, make sure to eat your leftovers. We would always have a leftover night every week growing up. And sometimes we'd be like, oh, leftovers, you know, some leftovers you like better than others. But it's so wasteful to just throw out the leftovers. And you're going to save so much money just by eating them instead of making a whole new meal. And finally, your kids don't need a ton of presents to be happy. My kids are going to hate it if they hear that, but it's true. You might think, oh, 13 kids, like how did your parents ever afford to do Christmas and birthdays and stuff like that? But the truth is my mom, for one thing, my mom is amazing. And even times when my parents like literally had like no money, somehow she always gave us amazing birthdays, amazing Christmas. But also she wasn't showering us with like loads of gifts. Your kids don't need a ton for it to be special and for it to be meaningful. And honestly, if you have a really big family, you don't want your kids to have tons and tons of toys because they will multiply very, very quickly. Okay, you guys, that's all the tips that I have for now. And I think I need to end this before I completely lose my voice. But I would love for you to let me know if this kind of content is interesting to you. Leave me a comment and let me know. And also let me know if you have any questions about what life was like in a big family. As always, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you again soon in my next video. Bye.